Ethan Cole had survived boardroom betrayals, hostile takeovers, and billion-dollar losses without flinching. But nothing prepared him for the moment he stood frozen in his own hallway, listening to a silence that felt wrong. His house had always been loud, violent with grief, full of screaming children and broken things. Yet that afternoon, the noise was gone. His heart began to race, not with relief, but with fear, because silence in this house usually meant someone had finally given up. He took one step closer, then another, his chest tightening as if something precious was about to be taken from him again. And when he reached the doorway and saw who had transformed his shattered home, his breath collapsed in his lungs. A black woman everyone warned him not to trust stood at the center of his family, and his 4 broken sons were no longer fighting. They were holding hands. What happened next would force Ethan to choose between comfort and truth, and before the night ended, something shocking would change this family forever. He came home early, not because he wanted to, but because something in his chest wouldn't let him stay away. Ethan Cole had built billion-dollar companies, negotiated with heads of state, survived market crashes that destroyed other men. Yet the moment he stepped into his own house in Scarsdale, New York, his body tightened like he was entering a war zone. He braced himself for noise, screaming, crashing, the sound of things breaking, again. But instead he heard nothing. Not silence the way it feels after damage. Not the quiet of children hiding. This was different, heavy, intentional, almost sacred. Ethan slowed his steps. His pulse pounded as he followed the stillness down the hallway toward the dining room. And then he stopped cold. 4 boys sat at the table, his 4 sons, Noah, Caleb, Evan, and Owen. They weren't fighting. They weren't yelling. They weren't destroying anything. They were holding hands, heads bowed, waiting. Ethan's breath caught painfully in his throat. In 3 years, 3 brutal, chaotic years, he had never seen this. Not once. Not after 22 nannies. Not after therapists. Not after specialists, behavior plans, or threats of boarding school. Never. And standing at the head of the table was a woman he barely knew, Naomi Brooks. She hadn't noticed him yet. Her voice was calm, low, steady, not commanding, not apologetic, just present. "Before we eat," she said gently, "let's take a moment." Ethan felt something inside him fracture. 3 years earlier, his wife Melissa had walked out without warning. No fight, no goodbye, just a note on the kitchen counter and 4 cribs upstairs. Ethan had learned how fast love could vanish and how deeply 4 small boys could feel that disappearance without having the words to name it. Noah, the oldest, became sharp, controlling, a general at 6 years old. Caleb turned explosive, anger spilling out of him like broken glass. Evan learned to disappear, to hide where no one could reach him. And Owen, sweet Owen, screamed. For hours, as if volume could pull someone back. 22 nannies had tried, 22 had failed, and now this woman stood here like she belonged. Naomi Brooks was not who Ethan expected when the agency called that morning. "She's unconventional," his assistant Harold Bennett had said carefully. "No formal childcare training. She's been a housekeeper most of her life. Heard about your situation through her church." Ethan had laughed then, bitterly. He had assumed desperation, hers, not his. When he opened the door earlier that day, he saw a tall black woman in her late 30s, simple white blouse, dark slacks, one worn duffel bag, and a Bible so used its cover was peeling. She didn't smile the way people smiled at rich men. She didn't straighten her posture or over-explain herself. She looked at him, not his house, not his money, him, and that unsettled him more than anything. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "I'm Naomi." Something about her calm irritated him. People were supposed to be nervous here. Everyone else was. He almost sent her away. But desperation has a way of lowering pride. Now watching her stand there with his sons, his broken, angry sons, Ethan felt fear crawl up his spine. Not fear of chaos, fear of hope. Because hope hurt when it left. Naomi finished speaking. She didn't pray the way Ethan remembered prayers. No big words, no performance. "Thank you for this food," she said, "and for these boys, especially on the days when love feels hard." She opened her eyes. That was when Noah noticed Ethan standing there. "Dad?" Noah asked quietly. Ethan flinched. Quiet questions were new. Naomi turned. Her eyes met Ethan's, and in that look he felt something unnerving, like she already knew how tired he was, how ashamed, how close he was to giving up. "Would you like to sit with us?" she asked. "Not Mr. Cole, not Sir, us." Ethan nodded, unsure how his legs carried him forward. As he sat, he noticed things that didn't make sense. Plates set evenly, napkins folded, his son's hands resting calmly on the table, not clenched, not twitching. Owen glanced up at Naomi the way children glance at safety, testing whether it will disappear. Ethan swallowed hard. This wasn't discipline. This was something else. Earlier that day, he had watched Naomi face the chaos head-on. He'd expected screaming, ultimatums, tears. Instead, she knelt. Right there on the floor, amid overturned chairs and broken toys, she lowered herself to their level. A black woman in a multi-million-dollar home that had already rejected 22 others, and she didn't flinch. "You're not too much," she told them. "You're not broken, and you're not unlovable." Ethan had expected laughter, cruel jokes, testing. What he got was silence. Then Naomi hummed, a soft, old tune, the kind that didn't demand anything, the kind that said, "I'm not afraid of you." When a trap soaked her with water later that afternoon, Ethan had rushed toward the noise, already forming apologies. Naomi was laughing, not mocking, not hysterical, real laughter. "Well," she'd said, wringing out her sleeve, "guess it's raining indoors today." Ethan watched his sons freeze, confused, off script. They had learned how to break people. They didn't know what to do when someone refused to shatter. But it wasn't just the boys watching her. The neighbors noticed too. The way Naomi walked through the grocery store with Ethan's sons, people stared. A black woman with 4 white boys in a wealthy suburb. More than one person assumed she was the help before Ethan even opened his mouth. Once a woman smiled tightly and asked Naomi, "Are they a lot to handle?" Naomi smiled back, gentle but firm. "They're children." That was it. No explanation, no apology. Ethan saw how often she absorbed those moments, how she chose grace over anger, but never humiliation. That night, as he sat at the table with his sons eating quietly for the first time in years, Ethan realized something terrifying. Naomi Brooks was doing what money, power, and control never could. She was staying, and staying, he knew, was the most dangerous promise of all. Because if she left, Ethan didn't know if his sons would survive another goodbye. And for the first time, he wondered something else, something that unsettled him deeply. What if the reason everyone else failed wasn't because his sons were impossible, but because no one before Naomi had ever truly seen them? As the meal ended, Owen knocked over his water. Ethan's body tensed, ready for the explosion. It didn't come. Naomi wiped it up, smiling. "Accidents happen." Owen smiled back. Ethan looked down at his hands, trembling. Something had shifted, and he didn't yet know whether to be grateful or afraid. Before the night ended, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling, a question burning in his mind. How long before the world reminds Naomi Brooks exactly how unforgiving it can be to a black woman who dares to change a family that powerful? And when that moment comes, will she still stay? Before we go on, let me ask you something. Do you believe love alone can undo years of trauma and racism? Yes or no? Your answer might change how this story unfolds. By the 3rd week, Ethan Cole stopped counting quiet moments. He didn't trust them. Peace in his house still felt temporary, like borrowed time that could be snatched back without warning. Every morning he woke up braced for the crash that never came. Every night he waited for the scream that didn't arrive. And every day Naomi Brooks stayed. She stayed through the stares, through the whispers, through the moments Ethan began to notice only because they were aimed at her. The first time it happened, he was distracted. They were at Riverview Elementary, meeting with the school counselor. Noah had been in another incident weeks earlier, before Naomi arrived, so the meeting was mandatory. The counselor smiled at Ethan warmly, firm handshake, respectful tone. Then she turned to Naomi. Her smile shifted, just slightly, the way people don't realize they do when assumptions kick in. "And you are?" the counselor asked. Naomi answered calmly, "I help care for the boys." The counselor nodded, then looked back at Ethan. "So, Mr. Cole, what strategies have you been using at home?" Ethan frowned. Naomi was sitting right there. She had spent hours working with the boys, building routines, calming storms before they erupted. But the questions weren't for her. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. "No," he said slowly. "What strategies have we been using?" The counselor hesitated. Naomi met Ethan's eyes, not surprised, not grateful, just steady. That was the moment Ethan realized something uncomfortable. Naomi wasn't just carrying his son's pain. She was carrying the weight of being unseen. And it didn't stop there. At the grocery store, a cashier asked Naomi if she worked long hours with all those kids. At the park, another parent assumed Naomi was the nanny for multiple families and complimented her for keeping busy. Once, a security guard followed them through a high-end boutique while Ethan was distracted on the phone. Naomi noticed. She always noticed. She never said anything in the moment. But at night, after the boys were asleep, Ethan would find her sitting quietly on the back steps, looking out into the dark like she was holding something heavy inside her chest. "Does it ever stop?" he asked her once. Naomi didn't ask what he meant. "No," she said honestly, "but you learn which battles are worth fighting and which ones will steal your peace." Ethan had money, power, influence. Naomi had none of that, and yet she was the bravest person in his house. The real storm came in May. Mother's Day advertisements flooded the city, cards, balloons, commercials filled with smiling women and perfect families. Ethan saw the shift in his sons immediately. Noah grew quiet, too quiet. His eyes sharpened, calculating again. Caleb's temper flared at the smallest things. Evan vanished into corners. And Owen. The screams came back, shorter than before, but raw, uncontrolled. "They're regressing," Ethan said one evening, pacing the kitchen. "Everything we worked for, it's falling apart." Naomi was folding laundry. She didn't rush him, didn't contradict him sharply. "They're not regressing," she said gently. "They're remembering." "Remembering what?" "They don't even remember their mother." Naomi paused. "They remember being left." Ethan stopped pacing. "That kind of memory doesn't live in the mind," she continued. "It lives in the body." The next morning, Ethan woke to silence, the wrong kind. He followed the stillness down the hallway toward Naomi's room. The door was open. What he saw made his blood run cold. Clothes thrown everywhere, drawers pulled out, her small duffel bag ripped open, and on the floor, her Bible, torn, pages scattered like snow. The boy stood in the center of it all. Noah's face was streaked with tears. Caleb's knuckles were bleeding. Evan shook like he wanted to disappear into the walls. Owen screamed, not in rage but in grief, so deep it sounded like something tearing apart. "You'll leave!" Noah shouted when Naomi appeared behind Ethan. "Just like she did." "We ruined everything," Caleb yelled. "That's why she left us. That's why everyone leaves." Ethan stepped forward, heart hammering. He was ready to end it, to yell, to punish, to protect Naomi. She lifted her hand, just slightly. He froze. Naomi walked past him. She sat down on the floor, right in the middle of the destruction. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry out in anger. She cried with them. "You're right," she said softly, tears sliding down her face. "You're right to be angry. You're right not to trust." The boys froze. "Your mama leaving wasn't because you were bad," Naomi said, her voice breaking. "Sometimes grown-ups break, and children pay the price." Noah collapsed to his knees. "Then why didn't she want us?" he whispered. Naomi pulled him into her arms. "I don't know, baby," she said honestly. "I don't know." One by one, the boys folded into her. Caleb, Evan, Owen. 4 children clinging to a black woman the world had taught them might not stay. "I'm not leaving," Naomi whispered. "Not today, not tomorrow, not because you're hurting." Ethan stood in the doorway, useless. He had tried to fix everything. Naomi had chosen to sit in the pain. That night, after the house finally went quiet, Ethan found Naomi in the kitchen. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook slightly as she poured water. "I should fire you," he said hoarsely. Anyone else would have walked out. She looked at him, calm, steady. Anyone else didn't lose a child, she said. The words landed hard. Naomi told him then, about her daughter, about the hospital rooms, the prayers that went unanswered, about how grief nearly killed her, and how surviving taught her something dangerous. That broken people don't need fixing, she said. They need someone willing to stay. Ethan sank into a chair, tears he didn't remember inviting sliding down his face. I don't know how to love them the way you do. You do, Naomi said softly. You're just afraid. The next day, Ethan overheard something that changed everything. Noah was talking to a classmate on the phone. She's not our mom, Noah said, voice firm. But she chose us. That counts more. Ethan leaned against the wall, breath stolen. But the world wasn't done testing them. A neighbor filed a complaint, said Naomi made them uncomfortable, said she didn't look like family. The words burned. Ethan stared at the letter, hands shaking, not with fear but rage. Naomi read it quietly. I can leave, she said. I don't want to make things harder. Ethan stood up. No, he said. You don't get pushed out for loving my kids. For the first time, Naomi looked surprised, and somewhere deep inside Ethan, a line was crossed. There would be no more silence, no more standing back, because if the world wanted to test whether Naomi Brooks belonged in his family, they were about to find out how fiercely he would fight back. The letter didn't end things the way the neighbors thought it would. It ended something else. Ethan Cole had lived his entire adult life avoiding conflict unless it benefited him financially. Silence had always been safer, quieter, cleaner. But when that letter landed on his desk, polite words wrapped around ugly fear, something in him shifted for good. We're concerned about the presence of unfamiliar domestic staff, it read. Several residents feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Naomi Brooks stood in the kitchen when Ethan finished reading it. She didn't ask what it said. She already knew. People like her always knew before the words arrived. I can start looking for another place, she said softly. I don't want the boys caught in the middle. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had sat on his floor while his children broke apart, at the woman who had absorbed insults with dignity and still chosen kindness, at the woman the world kept trying to remind didn't belong. No, he said firmly, you're not the problem. The following Saturday, Ethan hosted a neighborhood meeting. People came curious, suspicious, some defensive. Others already decided. Naomi didn't attend. She was with the boys in the backyard, planting tomatoes the way she always did, hands in dirt, teaching patience through growth. Ethan stood in front of a room full of polished smiles and folded arms. I've received complaints, he began calmly. Not about noise, not about safety, about who is allowed to love my children. A murmur spread. She is not staff, he continued. She is family. And if her presence makes anyone uncomfortable, I suggest you ask yourselves why. Someone scoffed. People are just asking questions. So did my sons, Ethan said. They asked why people stare, why they assume, why kindness from a black woman is seen as suspicious instead of sacred. Silence. If this community only accepts families that look a certain way, he added, then it was never the safe place I thought it was. The meeting ended awkwardly. Some left angry, some thoughtful, a few ashamed. But Ethan didn't care. For the first time, he had chosen truth over comfort. The real moment came that night, Mother's Day. The boys refused to make cards. Naomi didn't push. She spread paper and markers on the table anyway. Let's make something different, she suggested. Something honest. They created a poster together. Drawings, words, messy and imperfect. At the bottom, Naomi wrote one sentence. Love isn't about blood. It's about who stays. They hung it on the refrigerator, and somehow the day didn't hurt as much. Months passed. Healing didn't arrive loudly. It crept in quietly. Noah began reading to Owen at night. Caleb learned to build instead of destroy. Wooden boxes, small toys he gave away proudly. Evan started talking about dreams instead of hiding from them. Owen sang Naomi's humming songs while he played. And Ethan? Ethan learned how to kneel, not just physically, but emotionally. One evening, he overheard Noah speaking to a classmate. She's not our mom, Noah said. But she chose us. That's stronger. Ethan leaned against the wall, tears pressing behind his eyes. That was when he realized the truth he'd been avoiding. He wasn't just grateful. He was in love. The realization terrified him. Love had left him once. Love had broken his house apart. But this love had stayed through broken Bibles, bleeding fists, and nights soaked in grief. He spoke to the boys first. "I want to ask Naomi to stay," he said carefully. "Forever, but only if you want that." The boys didn't hesitate. "We already decided," Noah said. "Months ago," Caleb added. "She didn't leave when we were awful," Evan whispered. "That means she's real," Owen said softly. Ethan pulled them into his arms and cried like he hadn't in years. They planned quietly. Nothing fancy. Naomi didn't like fancy. The backyard, string lights, the garden they'd grown together. On the night Ethan knelt, all 5 of them knelt. Naomi covered her mouth, tears streaming. "I came here just trying to survive," she whispered. "And you taught me how to live again?" "Yes," she said. 1,000 times yes." They became a family not because the world approved, but because they chose each other anyway. A year later, a photograph hung by the front door. Naomi in a simple dress, Ethan behind her. 4 boys smiling, not perfectly but honestly. And in her arms, a baby girl named Amara, meaning grace, meaning strength, meaning the future. Some neighbors still stared, others smiled. But the house breathed easily now, because love had won, not loudly, not violently, but stubbornly, and that was enough. Before we end, let me ask you something. Did this story move you? Yes or no? Do you believe love can challenge racism in everyday moments? Yes or no? Would you choose to stay even when the world makes it hard? Yes or no? If this story touched your heart, please comment 111 below so I know you felt it. Tell me which country you're watching from. And if you believe stories like this matter, please share this video. Because sometimes the most powerful change begins with a story.